Welcome back to Horrifically Well Read, Bled, and Said. We are so honored and excited today to be talking to Clay Kane, author of the recent Burn Down Master's House, a novel that I think kind of bridges the gap between historical fiction, horror, and some of the things that we get into here. And we're just really excited to have a really great conversation. Welcome, Clay.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I love it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So, when we first approached you, you had mentioned that you were very sort of surprised, but also really excited that our, regular audience, horror readers, have really embraced Burn Down Master's House. And I just was wondering, one, how have you seen that? And sort of like when you said like that's really exciting, I just want to hear like your thoughts on this audience kind of embracing
Yeah,
it.
what's been the reception like, and how does that feel?
It's been so much love from the horror audience. And at first it surprised me because I didn't see it as horror at first. I just saw it as historical fiction, rooted in this awful time in American history. But the more I think about it, when I first began reading as a kid, I began reading horror.
Yeah.
And
Really?
my original short stories in the 7th grade, I would write horror short stories.
Love that.
So I would read, and I know some folks debate if she's horror, but like VC Andrews,
Hmm.
Flowers in the Attic, Stephen King, Dean Koontz. Like I would read these horror authors. So at first I was like, this isn't horror. But then the more that I thought about it, I think the reason why horror audience that has dig Burned Down Master's House is because this really is a story about good and evil. That's
Mhm.
what it's about. And in so
Absolutely.
many of these horror stories, it is a battle of good and evil. And this is a level of evil that is despicable and shameful, and it is rising up against evil. And in horror stories, you sometimes see when you rise up, the rise up may be kind of violent, it might be graphic, but in order to kill the monster, you kinda have to show the monster who they are.
Yep.
So I think that, it's really fucking cool that the
Yeah.
horror audience has, dig that because I didn't see it that way, but there's a little boy in me in this book that I think I was, remember, I mean, Stephen King was very graphic. I mean, I remember reading
Right.
Misery before it came out.
Yeah.
Like this was graphic stuff. So it actually makes sense. At first I didn't get it, but then I was like, wait a minute. Horror is about fears of the culture at the time. And
Yes.
there are people that fear stories like this, fear truth like this. So I really dig it. It's pretty cool.
I've been we've, probably done over like 100 episodes or so, and every time we talk about horror, and we release every Monday and every Thursday, and I still feel like every time we have a discussion with an author, I can't believe how much that horror continues to show all the ugliness in the world. And it's like, I feel like there's this patriarchal or capitalistic viewpoint of, the white picket fence and the 2.5 ton, this happy dream. And really, whether you're dealing with zombies or you're dealing with, like I've even listened to before of like every generation has its own need for a vampire and how they make it recreate looking at this, it's we use hard to look at the ugly parts and say, "No, society really is this, and these are the ills that are really happening." And I think within all 4 of yours so let me just digress a minute here, where your book is essentially, like, in my opinion, feels like it's 4 novelettes that all relate to each other to make one large novel, almost like maybe 4 seasons in a show,
Yeah.
of just like it's like, man, each one is so impactful and excellent. But then I think the other thing that was, like, wild to me is I'm reading this fiction book, but you have this sourced as if it is so like you wanna know, it's like you're like, you brought every receipt with you of like, "Test me. Oh, I'll show you where it is. You're wrong because." And I just love that because in this day and age, we deal with so much bullshit of people being like, "Oh, well, that's misinformation," or that's it's like, "No. No, 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 you're wrong, and here it is, and here's where you can find it." And I love that, and it's basically like reading this unique hybrid novel of fiction and nonfiction combined, and I was like, "I am digging this."
Hmm.
Because I think a lot of us are neurodivergent, and a lot of the authors that we talk to love to do research. We just don't get to see what research they're doing, and you're like, "Here you go." So it's,
Mhm.
like, fun that if I wanna go down the rabbit hole,
And we do.
and we do, you've already provided the easy escape.
Yeah, no, listen, that was really important for me to, I have over 40 footnotes in the book, 40 citations in the book. So to people, let folks know that this is real. This is based on real people and it's fictionalized, obviously, but these are names who have been erased in history. These are names that we don't know. So how can I resurrect these people? So kind of going from a horror spiritual sense, this book is ancestral in a way. Remember that movie Serpent in the Rainbow? And it kind of dealt with what they call voodoo and all that kind of stuff. But there is ancestral even a little bit in Serpent and the Rainbow. So I am lifting up these people that history has said they should not be remembered, but I'm saying they should be remembered. And what does justice look like? What does fighting back look like? And I remember there's one scene in it where the character Josephine is poisoning the entire family, and one of my editors, there's a line where Josephine says to Lady Baynard, she says, "Now scream for me. I want to hear what mercy sounds like." And one of
Uh,
my editors, really really cool guy, he goes, "Clay, this is too gruesome. It's just too much." I said, "And that's why I'm keeping it in." You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Because honestly, the things that, reading from, like, Octavia Butler
Yeah.
to I mean, the things that we're able to see through the lens of fiction and, the imagery, there was no compassion. There was, even like when I said to Adam, the book by Jesmond Ward, Let Us Descend,
mm,
was one of the most painful books I've read in my entire life. Of just felt like I had to like kind of just like keep taking it because of the way there's no mercy. So why shouldn't when she Josephine gets the revenge? I do want to hear what it looks like because you know what? You have never treated me like a human being.
Mhm.
So it's like
you don't consider me to be, right?
yes,
Mhm.
and it's a very small taste of justice, very, very small, not nearly enough, but, you know, that I of I don't know, I'm thinking of, like, the idea of don't stoop to their level, but it's like
When they go high or when they
yeah,
go low, we
exactly,
go
and
high,
I'm
and
just
it's like,
like but at the same time, they don't have a conscience.
no,
How can you ever compete with something like that?
right.
Right, and what do you do, I think I heard Denzel Washington say this when he played Malcolm X, that when the sheep decides, "I will no longer let the wolf eat me," right? "I will no longer let you, abuse me." And if and I one of the things that I ask people to think of in the book is that, what would you do? What would you do if you were in a circumstance where the only way to escape is to end the bloodline?
Yeah.
The only way to escape is to give yourself more time and to end them. And what would you do with that rage? What would you do with that anger? And think what it would take somebody to a space they would have to get in their mind, in their spirit, and their soul to say, in order for me to be free, I'm going to poison you as I'm being raped and assaulted. So, what does the
But
fight
it would take me that much. I
exactly?
really don't think it would take me very much, and I think that's part of it was the conditioning and just not, being taught like you don't get to fight back, and the punishments that come. So, maybe someone that wasn't regularly conditioned, it wouldn't take them much longer. But I think about how
Mhm.
much they had to endure to
Generation
even get
upon
to that level of
and
saying, I'm gonna do this.
what I found, like, fantastic and what I love about this book is that I feel like when we learn about, and this is sort of in that the 25, 30 years leading up to the Civil War, that era, I think that we're taught about Nat Turner's rebellion, right? And it's sort of taught as, like, that's the one that happened.
Mhm,
And it's sort
mhm.
of like, okay, and that one scared all the white people so
Right.
bad that they created the fugitive slave laws and all these different kinds of things. And I love that this is like, no, this was happening far more often than you really realize. But of course, that's not something that would be talked about because of that same reason of the absolute fear that it would bring into people. And what's fascinating, myself, I was born near Nashville, Tennessee. And when my grandmother died, one of the things that I got was my great 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 grandfather's memoir as a doctor in the Confederate Army.
Wow.
And he was an enslaver. And it's one of the things that I love to bring out when people talk about how the Civil War was about states' rights and all of these
Mm.
things, I was like, well, this was written 5, 10 years after the Civil War, and he says right here, we went to war to keep slaves. Like, you can't say that that's not what's happening. But as the war goes on and he goes back to visit his home, he's shocked that his slaves have run away, the enslaved people.
Your
Yeah,
grandfather.
my great-great-grandfather's like, "What's happening here?" And so it's like this thing, and I think that you touch on it here, and what I love about that is, like, no, these people were fighting back. These people were not just accepting it where they were, and sometimes to do that, you know, it's going to be it has to be violent because they were the amount of violence that was
Lived.
inflicted on them, physical, emotional, sexual, every kind of violence imaginable was inflicted, so it makes no sense that it wouldn't be reversed and
Absolutely.
reciprocated in order to gain what every single human being wants, which is just the ability to live their life, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was I encourage folks to read the author's note. And I could have had the author's note be like 100 pages. I had to like calm down at a certain point. But there were so many enslaved people burning down their master's house in certain areas of the South. They had to put in arson laws. It was so bad. They were putting in arson laws. There were so many reports of poisonings that the quote unquote enslavers were getting so terrified. Because here's the arrogance of slavery, to think you can put these people in bondage, put these souls in bondage, and you think you're gonna get away with it. And in many places, the black folks who lived on the plantation outnumbered the white people in the house. So the arrogance of you thinking that you're gonna be okay and everything's gonna be fine and you can live like this and there will be no repercussions is just asinine to me. And the fight back was constant. And that's what we see. I'm doing research for the follow-up, and it's just there are so many stories out there. But one of the things that I wanted to show is I say in the book, one flame can spark 1,000 fires. So what happens to what y'all were saying, what happens in chapter one, it triggers the next person, right? Because to burn it down, you got to start in your mind first. You have to believe that you could burn it down first. You have to have that belief that you could fight back and you could win. Not to give a cheesy example, but even the whole idea of Nightmare on Elm Street, they
Mhm.
had to believe through their dreams they could beat Freddy Krueger, that they
Yeah.
can beat the villain.
Yeah,
They
but
had
even
to start there.
Olympians where they say you have to envision winning the medal, like, it's
Exactly.
that projection, yes.
Exactly. So Henry and Luke and Ruby, they believe, especially Henry in the very beginning, that he knows this fire is important and he will push that fire on to the next person, to the next person. So it is that belief that rebelling is worth it. Right now in this time, it's not exactly the same, but the history rhymes. They're trying to convince us there's no point in fighting back. There's no point in, going to a protest. Nothing really matters because no matter what you do, you're going to lose. And I refuse to believe that. I still believe that good can rise up against evil, right?
Yep,
And
yep,
that's the heart.
yep. I think the people of Minneapolis really showed that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That when enough people are incensed and outraged and saying absolutely not, and that, we don't care. We will, like, especially coming from white people, of saying we're going to put ourselves, in proximity to protecting our beloved neighbors and friends, and that you can't treat them like that. I think that, you know what I mean? It makes me think, like, genetically, is there shit passed down that it's like they expect us to just identify with, like, the color of our skin, say, "You know what? It's okay. I don't mind if you treat people like this as long as it's not affecting me." And I think there's a
Mm.
decent amount of people that rely upon that. And I think cities like that and compassionate areas like that are saying, "No, absolutely not. We're not gonna go to work. We're gonna stop doing this. We're gonna take deliveries. We're gonna figure this out." And, I it's like winning something like that makes you think that, okay, we can continue to stand up. And just even the whole concept, and I often, have been on record of saying, like, I am a naive person. I often give people the benefit of that, or sometimes things like hit me later. Adam's the other one where he's completely suspicious, and he's very smart about that. But for me, it's like I can tell from the first time I heard the phrase "Make America Great Again" to even now. I'm like, when I look at the hat now, I'm like, "For who? You
Right.
want this to be in the '50s, like, for who?" this
Right.
is for you wanna take it all the way back to as much entitle it's like, this is just and the people that I guess I just thought, I'm like, "You're idiots at the beginning," or, "What's wrong with it right now?" Like, I was so cerebral, and now I'm like, "Oh my god, you're just saying the quiet part out loud." You're like,
Yeah.
okay, just saying, "Yes, I hate you." Like, I don't care, and
Mhm.
it's just it's just really, I guess, it's this time frame where, I mean, Adam's even gotten to the point where he's like, "I'm not gonna go have dinner with your family, or I'm not even gonna step in their house because they voted for Trump," and he's like, "No, they're basically nice Confederates, like, I'm not going."
Mm,
And you know what? When he said that, I was like, but, like, you're not wrong because, and it's come up with a big deal, like, what am I gonna stand for? Who am I gonna spend my time around? Because if you don't see anything wrong with it, or you're willing to pollute your mind with these things, and it's like there's really no point, like, talk about that a lot on the show here of, like, how much do you try to convince? How much do you try to argue for this? And, so I even, like, sat with my mother and told her the stories from your book,
mm.
because especially the Thaddeus Stevens one.
Mm.
Yes,
'Cause
the
we live about
abolitionist.
45 minutes from Thaddeus Stevens College.
We do.
Oh,
We're right
wow.
yeah.
Yes,
So
and
we're,
we also live, like, 45 minutes from, like, where the part is, like, in Molly Pitcher Highway, where she's crossing over from Maryland into Gettysburg
Yes,
yeah.
area.
yes. Mhm.
And so, I mean, I was all like, "Do you think he's good? Do you think he was a good person?" "Well, yeah, he's a." I'm like, "Wrong. Let me
Right.
tell you." It's like, "Oh my god, I never knew." I'm like, "Yeah." And I was like, "And this is why you're never gonna know, because if you're only reading for pleasure and you're only like," and she's just kinda like, "Why don't you turn off the news? Like, why is it such a big deal?" And I'm like, "Because I said, "That's like the privilege that we can turn it off." And I was like, "My brother is a, chaplain for the prison." And I said, "He wants to pray for everybody that's in there, but what about the laws and the amount of mass incarcerations that are happening unfairly?" Like, that's what and it's like, we're not looking at that. And so for me, as you can hear, I'm very passionate right now.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
The rose-colored glasses, like, all of this, and I just think that I grew up in this area, which is a very deep red area, and I'm grateful that I was never that way and always questioned things, but I continue to be like, "Holy shit, everything I thought I knew was a lie." And your
Mm,
book just continued to show me that, of the local history, things that I just thought, and I'm grateful for someone like you who's creating pieces like this for me to continue to learn and change, and then confidently pass it on to
Mm.
others.
you know what's so great about that is that I always say this, that, you know, I didn't know my history when I was a kid, right? And they obviously don't want black kids to know their history, but they don't want white kids to know either, because they don't want white kids to see themselves in the real heroes, not in, George Washington and all that kind of stuff, but to see themselves in John Brown, for example, who was a white abolitionist, who was freaking incredible, who lost his life fighting against slavery. Or they don't want to see themselves. They're afraid of white kids seeing themselves in Josephine from my book, or Charity from my book. Those are the real heroes. Those are the real Americans, right? The people who fought back against slavery, they were called terrorists. They
Yeah.
were they were called unpatriotic. So my hope is, with this book, with the fire and fever in it, that people of all backgrounds will read it and they'll see who the real heroes are. There should be no sympathy. I see enslavers like Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy.
Yes.
I see them as serial killers. That's what you
Mhm.
were.
They
You
were,
were
you're 100% right.
you were torturing people. There was no accountability for it. And honestly, I held back on some of the torture that happened to black folk. I could have went even further, but that's what I see them as. They were torturing and harming human beings, children, men, women, and so on.
You
But
know what? Why wouldn't we call them that? Like, now that you
they're
say
serial
that, why wouldn't
killers.
they? They've
Yeah,
killed more people, and yet we focus on these true crime people as, like,
right.
serial killers, but it's like it was socially acceptable,
It
or as a
was.
lot of people say, "It was a different time back
Yeah,
then."
Mhm.
but
Bitch,
I,
no, it wasn't.
I tell
No, it
people it
wasn't,
was
they were still people. There's no way you didn't see them suffering.
Mhm.
No.
exactly, and I tell people that, oh, it was a different time. Well, the Quakers were against slavery. There was other. It was they weren't all this way. So my hope is that people will see themselves in Josephine. Look at the complications of Miss Clara, for example, in the book. Miss Clara, who is a Northerner, but she doesn't really think about slavery. It doesn't really impact her, but she marries a Southerner because she thinks get some money. He leaves her, and now she's a woman who doesn't have full citizenship. And so this is there's a connectivity, a thread with all of us in this.
I loved that part because it's very much the female that votes along the party lines of her
Yeah,
husband or
yeah.
feels like, "I just don't need to speak up," and,
Mhm.
and she came from, what was it, Vermont that
Yeah.
Yeah,
that she
Vermont,
had
exactly, yeah.
and, was raised kind of with those abolitionist type of attitudes and things, and it's like, then she's shit out of luck, and it's like, not that you but it's like, what's the theme here? Is that people that are, essentially, I think that's the theme throughout, it's like selfishness,
Mhm.
power, doing what's best for me,
I think that
was pervasive.
what's interesting, and you kinda touched on this both in the book, I think in previous things that I've heard from you talk about too, and a previous guest that we had on the show was Aaron Crosby Eckstein, who wrote the book Junie, and talking about how we kind of always think about that white male enslaver as being so horrible, but there are plenty of proof and things in history of when a white female is in charge that they sometimes did things and acted in ways that were even worse or as bad. I love that you shed light on that as well in sort of things that you've talked about in this book too. So I think that, the pervasiveness of the mentality and sort of understanding what our true history in this country is. And I want to talk about Reconstruction a little bit in a second
Sure,
too.
yeah.
But like the way that it's being whitewashed again is so insidious and so purposeful and so reflective of the lost cause and all those sort of narratives. And everyone's always looking for a reason to say, but it wasn't me, but it wasn't my family, it wasn't this and that. And it's like, you know what? It was. I'm sorry. You're gonna have to accept that.
You trace it back. 2 things I wanna say to that real quick. One is, they are trying to take sociology as I think, as a major out of Florida schools,
Yeah.
like, because, as you
Or
said,
yeah.
they don't want you to know. And then just some of the curriculum where, like, at least around here, it's like, we don't want people to feel ashamed of their history of
Mhm.
the American as an American. What are you talking
Then
about?
you're not learning your
Then how
history.
do you yeah, like, then
How
how
do
do
you grow?
you like, that's
Mhm.
crazy. And then last week, we were looking at they were doing genealogy research, and it was showing that Paris Hilton's family, when they went back, that
Had enslaved Lizzo's family,
had
yeah.
enslaved Lizzo's family,
Wow.
and there was other ones that they were talking about, and it was like, they're like, "There's no way that anybody has this much money in life without having done slavery as at some point."
Or at least benefited from the
Yes,
labor that yeah.
the flow that comes down,
Mhm.
from family to generation, and there was more comments in that of other ones, and it's just like, that's why, you think it's this long ago, but it's not. And even, like, when we were watching, Sinners, and I was like, what's happening here? What is happening along, like,
Side of the road.
essentially, yeah, like, the
The chain gang, the
yeah,
yeah.
and I did not I thought just from the movie that these were people that, were just out working that were prison, and I was like, "No." Like, they could literally be trying to find a job, and because they didn't have a job, you're going to jail.
You're standing
Exactly.
outside the wrong store.
You're
Yeah.
going to jail.
Exactly.
It's like
Just
you're going for any and I'm like, so it's
For
just any reason to just lock you
yeah.
up and to punish you for the
Mhm.
fact that you're free now, and it's just that's why, I mean, obviously, the movie's brilliant itself, but there's just so much that I don't feel like in my history class in 7th, 8th, ninth, it's like, I didn't get those things.
Mhm.
We weren't talking about that, like, I think that's my favorite thing about your book is and maybe it's because I'm 42 now, and maybe because I'm living the current modern day history that we are, but I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I remember hearing that name," or, "Oh, yeah, I remember that," but it's like, it didn't mean anything to me back then.
Mhm.
It was just, "How do I do this test?" And now I
Yeah.
realize this is why it's so important to understand it, and this is how it all connects, and just as you said, the unwhitewashing of it of,
Mhm.
actually, no, this is really what happened.
and also too, part of the reason why we still have these issues around race in our history is because we haven't told the truth. Imagine if we would have started telling the truth after the Civil War, during Reconstruction. We'd be a much different country. If we would have told this version, burn down master's house of slavery, if everybody knew this, we'd be a much different country. But instead, we want to just breed in these lies, breed in misinformation. That is a contagion. Then we have to argue the minute details of
Mm,
governor of Florida saying there were personal benefits to slavery,
mhm.
Nikki Haley not being able to say the Civil War was about slavery. I mean, I always say this. Imagine like going to Germany and seeing Adolf Hitler High School. You don't see that
Right?
there. In Germany, you learn about Nazi Germany at a very young age when kids are like in elementary school to not repeat it again. So that's one of the mistakes we make in this country is that so many people do not know. They know about Harriet Tubman and maybe Frederick Douglass, but they think it was just a blip in American history. If we just could tell the truth, then we can move forward. But we can't move forward if we refuse to tell the truth. And we have the president of the United States wanting to walk through museums and look at imagery that might make America not look good enough. I mean, this is the mistake that we make. And I wanted to burn down the lies, burn down the tropes, burn down the stereotypes, burn down the misinformation, and burn down the disinformation to hopefully crack people open and say, you know what? Let me look at this thing differently. Let me look at it through not just slavery, but rebellion,
Mm.
resistance, revolution. And I hope we can all be inspired by that kind of truth telling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about like what you're saying there, even with the school. Like, I went to school in Washington D.C., and my high school was Woodrow Wilson High School,
President
a
Wilson.
65% black high school
Wow.
named after one of the most racist,
Racist.
blatantly racist presidents, and it's changed the name since then, thank God. But those are the kinds of things that, like, when you think about sort of these very, like, again, it's under the surface. It's like, this thing where it's like you might not even know that when you go to that school, but something is seeping into the subconsciousness of that we are putting these figures on a pedestal that do not deserve to be. I'm thinking about, your first book, nonfiction of The Grift, where reading about Abraham Lincoln and even Thaddeus Stevens and these things where it's like no one is saint-like, and especially at that time, there's a very nuanced look at, what is going on, and there's nothing wrong with realizing Frederick Douglass had a lot more to do with emancipation than Abraham Lincoln does. That does not hurt American history to know that that is the truth, but because we want to have this narrative of this great white hope, this great white, emancipator of doing that, that we've told this lie that, really, it's like this idea that, oh, because Andrew Johnson became president, which was a terrible, tragic thing. There's no real proof or idea that Lincoln would have done any better of a job
Exactly.
Reconstruction than what happened with Johnson, right?
Exactly. No, listen, I always say this. So what Lincoln puts into play is the 10% plan, which is basically having 10% of the white men in the southern states give an oath that they will agree that slavery is over. And Frederick Douglass is like, "What the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
10%? Like you're literally going to give the South back to the people who tried to enslave us." But
Yeah,
Lincoln
let's
wanted
just
to,
hustle this time.
yeah, yeah, let's just, yeah, come on, a cute little apology and you're good. And to Thaddeus Stevens' credit, Thaddeus Stevens said that they should never be able to vote again if they were Confederates because
Right.
they were insurrectionists and they
Yep.
harmed American citizens. And the South should be military territories. They shouldn't even be allowed to rejoin the Union. But Lincoln said no because he cared about the Union. He cared about the South rejoining the Union. And because of that, Andrew Johnson follows his plan. Before Lincoln's even assassinated, he's putting in plan to forgive all these Confederates, to forgive all these folks. And so then, as soon as he's assassinated, Johnson's in power, and the South just is taken over completely. Then you have the Compromise of 1877, where there was a contested election, and they said, "We'll allow President Hayes to win if you leave the Negro problem to the South." And so they basically had slavery under another name, and the Confederacy just became Southern Democrats. And so all these things, and I just say, again, if we could just tell the truth about this, Lincoln was not the great emancipator. I mean, this would be like saying, "Oh, the reason why we had the American Revolution is because the British just said, 'Okay, good job, guys. We're just gonna give it to you.'" Anybody, any community, when they have progress, whether it is women, whether it is LGBT folks or Black folks, it is always that community rising up and saying no more. And it was Frederick Douglass pushing Lincoln into emancipation. It was Black soldiers fighting in the Civil War. It's the reason why we win that Civil War. So yeah, these are the basic things that I just wish a lot of us knew, and it's intentional for us not to know.
Right.
Just let's
Mm.
just tell the truth. How do you
Yeah,
Do
'cause
do
fix it? How
is
do
the
you fix
goal
these things?
Is the goal because speaking of the hope, is it like if we just never tell the truth, at some point we're gonna get it back to where it was so we never have to tell the truth? I mean, what is the why, this is obviously a deep, probably sociological and philosophical, but why are we not telling the truth? What is the benefit of not saying it? And obviously there's a lot of us that want to know. We want to know, you know, what happened inside of these Native American school or,
Yes.
like we want to
Mhm.
know these things. And that's another area that we live close to Carlisle, which is like one of the worst.
The first, yeah.
Yes, and it's just I guess that's what I'm saying is like, you have to really seek it out. You have to be a reader. You have to be trying for these things because otherwise, I mean, it's just not coming up and you're able to live in a level of bliss and maybe that's part of it is like if we just don't bring it up as human beings, we're not gonna a lot of them aren't gonna seek it out, and we don't have to atone for anything. Is it because they're expecting reparations, and they're worried about that? Like, obviously, I mean, the amount of arguments that I've had to have about what is the difference between affirmative action and help me out here, I'm having a
DEI,
DEI?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I was part of the DE&I committee for, like, my nationwide company that I was a part of, and it's just like, what is wrong with you? Why are you even giving me a black pilot example? That you would even like, why would you even naturally believe that a black pilot would be less? Like, do you understand your inherent bias that you could even be convinced this? Like, I don't think you even understand how conditioned you are, and
Yeah.
then in the headlines the other day, it said, "Pete Hegseth deliberately withheld," and I'm like, "See?
To promote, yeah,
It's
promotion.
Yeah.
still happening."
You know what I think it is? And this is my theory. I think at the end of the day, it is about profit. It is about going back to the Gilded Age.
Mm,
Okay.
It is about making the rich richer. The economy was very successful during slavery.
yeah.
It really was. And so, why? Because they were able to exploit people with no conditions. They were able to box people in these horrific free labor. This country has not figured out how to survive without free or cheap labor. That's why at the end of the book, I say, what do I say here? Let me just read this really quickly because I
Let me
think
just
it
check
really,
with myself real quick. Hang on.
uh
I said, "Let me just check with myself real quick. Hang on."
right. I just like this is really, I was basically tackling what you're saying here. It said the South, it's soil soaked with black, brown, and white blood, would attempt to rise under different names, different
Yes.
regions, different politics, and different faces. These false prophets, modern strongmen who wrap themselves in old flags and old lies, will stand again, demanding a return to what was. The presidents, prime ministers, oligarchs, demagogues, and an alliance of dictators will thrive by turning neighbor against neighbor to deflect their own sins. I mean, this is
Listen, listen, when I read that ending, I had, like, the full body chills
Yeah.
right.
because it's like you talked about the past, and again, you could read that what you just said about what is happening right now.
Mhm.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, in what is a way to end a book.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's really interesting because I moved to Washington, DC when I was about 3 years old, but we would go back and visit, family in the Nashville area, and I always remembered, like, this is I'm really young. Hadn't even really learned about the Civil War or any of these kinds of things, but my uncle had a vanity tag on the front of his truck that had "The South Will Rise Again," was what his tag said, and I always thought, like, what does that mean? And now I read what you said there and seeing what's happening, and that's what they mean,
Yeah.
right? It's like the South and the Confederacy and all of these things by another name, and that's really interesting, and, it really makes me think also too, when I was listening to you talk about your conversation with Wes Craven,
Yes.
when he talked about why the black person dies first, right? And, I wanna say what he said there, and I want you to say that in a second, but, like, I think on an individual basis, when you've wronged someone, it's expected you apologize and you make up for it. And so, ultimately, this is sort of like an entire group of people have been wronged. And if you accept that and you acknowledge that, you have to apologize for it and atone for it. And so that's why it's like this overall, like, we're not going to do that because to do that would lead to having to do something about it. And, that would mean taking away some of that inherent or that privilege that has been enjoyed. And it's like, no, I refuse to do that. And again, that comes back to power and money, right? So, but yeah, what was that exactly that Craven said? Do you remember?
So, Wes Craven, the master of horror, I interviewed him in April of 2011. I'll never forget it. And one of the screams came out, and we asked if he'd be interested in doing an interview with BET.com because horror movies chart really well with black audiences. And he said yes. And I was really surprised. And he was incredibly nice and he was incredibly cool. And we talked people under the stairs, which I loved.
Yeah,
And then I
more next
asked him,
Craven
oh
movies,
my
yeah.
gosh, great intersection of race, class, gentrification, just amazing. And like most young people, Wes Craven, I just adored him and his work. And I asked him, I said, what do you think about this perception that black people always die first in horror films? And he told me, he said, everybody is afraid of the people they've done terrible things to. And I just said,
That's it.
Wes Craven, that is just absolutely brilliant that he got it, and he laughed, but when he said it, because in a lot of his films, the black folks don't die first, Elise Neal doesn't die first, like, he kinda changes that trope a bit. Jada did in Scream 2, but that was for different reasons.
And Omar Epps.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But and then it's funny, at the end of the interview, I used to do this closer question. I would say, "When you get to heaven, what is the DJ playing?" And I asked him, I said, "When you get to heaven, Mr. Craven, what is the DJ playing?" He goes, "Well, I don't believe in heaven, but when I was a kid, I was in high school and Miles Davis Kinda Blue came out, and I listened to that album over and over and over." And I just said, "Look at Wes Craven
Mhm.
bringing up some Miles Davis." So, I think I never forgot that, and I still have the audio to it somewhere. But again, it goes back to horror understanding the culture. And if you understand fear in this country, you could do a lot. You can win elections, you can make money, you can move people and turning neighbor against neighbor. Fear is everything. And that's can be very sad and very joyful. It depends on
Yeah,
what you do with it. It's a
right.
power. So Wes Craven brought joy with his fear. But
Mhm.
there are other people today, they bring ugliness with their fear. Fear and love are powerful emotions, right? And I think he was able to see that. And everybody is afraid of people they've done terrible things to. So in some of these horror movies, they take out the black folks first because
Mhm.
they know that culturally we have done these terrible things. So for him to see that was really great. And it's one of, gosh, that was 15 years ago. My
Yeah.
goodness, my goodness.
Well, it's
Yeah,
funny too because you said at the very beginning, when she's poisoning or just when they're, taking out these people, burning down Master's house, they need to show them that they're the monster.
yeah,
And we talk a lot about horror being this mirror and being this reflection, and it really is putting that mirror up to them and saying, "You're the
you're the
monster."
monster.
Horror we've talked about a lot also being the one genre, almost so many other, whether it's film, whether it's literature, whatever it is an escape, right? It's like, this really terrible thing's happening. I wanna look away. I wanna look at different things. Horror is the one that looks it straight in the eye and says, "Why is this happening and how can I beat it?" Right? How can I beat that monster? And to do it, you have to go to dark places. You have to understand some really ugly shit to be able to defeat it. And, like, to know that that is a reflection on our society, it's a reflection on the fears, and the fears generally have to do with authoritarianism, it has to do with, like, these ugly things that are happening, and that's why horror right now is having a moment because horror is biggest when society is ugliest, and that's where we're
Mhm.
at right now.
You know, I remember a movie that had a big impact on me, The Poltergeist.
Mhm.
And on its surface, The Poltergeist is about, a haunted house, right? In the suburbs. But when you look at the movie, it was really that they built this massive suburb over a graveyard and didn't didn't move the bodies. It was sacred ground, right? And I remember when I was older and began to understand that, I just said, wow, look at this prophet. Not even respect for the dead,
Right.
right?
Right.
Not even respect that you will put, mind you, of course it's fictional, but you will put people, families at risk just
Mhm.
for profit, not moving these bodies. Then in Poltergeist 2, there is a Native American angle, which is really interesting as well. And I horror is about fear and also confronting the truth. And if you think about some of the great villains in horror, you see them fall apart when they are confronted with the truth. You see Michael Myers kind of crack a little bit when he finds out who his sister is. As crazy as he is, there's a little bit of a crack
Well,
in the crazy veneer when he finds out who the sister is, right? Even Freddy, to some degree, when he's confronted with his own demons, you think he might go away, right? Jigsaw as well. Jigsaw has his own trauma fighting cancer and wants other people to be grateful for their life. There is a theme in there of confronting, like you said, the ugliest parts of who we are and confronting that no matter what the result will be. There will be casualties and there will be losses, but the hope is you make it out on the other side and you will be different. And one thing I love about the folks in this book, what I tried to do is show that this was intentional. There was a strategy, there was a blueprint. They were waiting and planning and plotting all the time. They always believed that I will be able to escape this. And if
yeah.
I don't, I'm going to try again. So, how many times do you have to kill the monster? You decapitate Michael Myers, but you know what? He comes back, you're going to keep going. How many times are you going to take the monster out? You're going to keep on taking that monster out until he's gone or till she is gone. And that's one of the themes of horror, that you keep on confronting that monster. And going back to where we are culturally, it just feels like we want to avoid the monster so much that sometimes we end up becoming the monster. And that's what scares me. I don't want us to turn against each other. I don't want us to hate each other. Let's look at the rich guy at the top. Let's look at them. Now we think we're the monsters. They've convinced us that trans people are the monsters, that some random immigrant is the monster.
I
This is
know.
ridiculous. Like,
Agreed.
who is the real fucking monster? It's not
It is, it's the capitalist. It always
right.
is, and it has been, and it's like you can almost it's like they said all the time, "Follow the money."
Yeah.
It really is, though, and I think the conflation lately with, um, evangelicalism
Mm.
as Christian nationalism, it's this I mean, even just recently, Pope Leo just came out and was like, "No, God you can't pray to for God to be with you while you're over here committing war I mean, I'm
Right.
paraphrasing, but he's like, "He's not gonna bless that." But there's this level of delusional or just really what it is conditioning.
Yeah.
But again, what did you say just a few minutes ago? If you understand fear, which is if you can scare them to death that they're gonna go to hell and be in a pit,
Yeah.
you can condition that, and that's a big part of it. I did just wanna touch on real quick because I do love to read just, like, outside of, horror itself, and I love a lot with, nonfiction, but the book by Heather Cox
Oh yeah.
Richardson,
I
How
love
the
her.
South Won the Civil War.
Yes, I was
I
thinking that
gave
when we were
that a
talking
5
about it.
stars, and I read that before all this bullshit was happening, and I'm like, "I need to read this again," because it really talks about what you said, which is no, I mean, they really never have had to like, when you're saying you gotta cut the head off again and
Yeah.
again with Michael Myers and fight the monster, it does keep coming back,
Yeah,
and
it's Hydra, right?
it is
Yeah.
Yep.
that, yes, and
Yep.
we have to keep doing it, and that's why the books and the banning of books and the certain things, that's why, because they don't want you to be educated. They don't want you to be critically thinking. That's why, like, even the CRT, it was like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, we don't wanna talk about that." It's just and then you have to say, "Why? Why?" You know? Eh, but I just again, I feel like there's so much inherent privilege in so many of the people that I grew up around that they don't care. I mean, it
Yeah.
never even crossed their mind, and that, again, is just the privilege, it is do you ever wonder why everybody in this town is predominantly white? Do you understand why everybody has family here? Do you understand why there's roads named after everybody? Do you understand, like, it was written, like, the book Color of Law, where it's
Mhm.
written into the buying contracts,
The
I mean,
deeds, yeah.
of the homes? It's like and then you're gonna sit and just be confident in your ignorance, and so that's why I feel like the style with what you wrote this book, it was like, not only am I having the best time reading this, not only am I so happy to see them kick ass and the things that happen, but I'm also, having a mirror held up to me and I'm having a moment of reflection and I'm thinking, what other books do I need to read? Not just of yours because you have plenty of them and you're great at what you do, but what don't I know? What do I need to know more about? If I just learned all this, what else do I probably not know? What else has been, have I been misguided about? Or who are probably anybody that I think was a hero probably isn't, right? You
Mhm.
just
Or
start going,
there's nuance to
no,
everything, yeah, for
no,
things,
there's
yeah.
like that book, The Lies My Teacher Told
Mhm.
Me.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Like, you gotta take that one slow because, like, at the beginning of that book, it says, like, "People have said this will change their life," and I'm like, "That sounds a little dramatic," and then I listened to, like, the first chapter, I'm like, "Yep, yes, it's gonna change my life,"
Yeah.
because it is I cannot believe the amount of just and what Brianna N. Cox just recommended to you, the book that you just highlighted, like
Oh, Original Sins?
Mhm.
I'm a teacher, and reading that book and sort of saying because there is that sort of whether it's especially education, it's like, "Oh, it's broken, the system's broken." No, it's doing exactly what it was meant to do. And, like, understanding that's true there, and it's true in so many other systems that have, been created in this country, like, it is doing exactly what it's supposed to, and what it's supposed to is evil, you know?
Mhm.
And so, again, that's another monster that has to be faced and defeated, and, it just kind of all ties in together there.
No, absolutely, and, what I like, though, is that you're asking the what. That what can I do? What can I read more of? What can I absorb? And I think that's a really important step because at this point, we're like in I don't know, what Halloween 12, like, we're
right,
just doing, like,
right,
the same thing
Michael Myers has
over
gone to space, he's
and then
gone to online, like,
Freddie and Michael are like we keep on making the same mistakes over and
yeah,
over again,
right.
and we don't have to be here. I think that's what saddens me. I'm like, "This didn't have to happen, and here's where we are." But my hope is that people will wake up enough and be triggered enough to be able to take this monster out. So, and we're still going to have issues. We're still going to have challenges. We're not going to always agree on everything, but we have to get to some core level, base level things that these things are wrong. That I don't know, we shouldn't have a $7.25 minimum wage.
mm,
That's nobody should be, that's ridiculous. That's
yeah,
horrible.
can't
How
live on
can
that.
you how can you live how can anybody live on that? That people shouldn't have to go to an emergency room to get health care. I mean, these are just certain base level things, and my hope is that we're getting closer to waking up.
It's
Yeah,
the lie, though, that we continue to and again, it's a capitalist lie of, you could have more if you wanted more,
if
Right,
you
if we
just
just
worked
work
harder.
hard. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's like it disregards, like, the whole part of, like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs and, like, the structures, and that they just I mean, but that's the lie, that's the conditioning and the fear again is I mean, I remember that from my very first college experience of Sociology 101, and we did this whole, like, Titanic type of, thing of and everybody had to be a certain type of person in the and they were like, "Okay, well, different levels of, education, different levels of class, just like it would be on, like, what level of ticket you owned and all those things." And they were like, "Okay, well, who's getting kicked off the boat?" And it was immediately like, exactly who you think it's gonna be,
Yeah.
and it's like wow, it's like we will repeat it again. When push comes to shove, we will make those same stupid choices again. And we'll pick that, we'll say, you know what, the person who's just, a worker or whatever, yeah, they're okay to die. They're expendable because we can't get rid of this mayor because
Yeah.
he's valuable. And it's like, but why?
Mhm.
And how did he get there and stuff? And so I wanted to go into a little bit just quickly here on the discussion questions. How much of a did you write these yourself? Is this
Yeah.
something you worked on with your editor? Like, cause I don't have anybody to like. I need to at the end of this. I plan to put together like a
Book
group of
club.
people that want to do
Yeah.
this because I'm like, I need to have these questions, and you're welcome, obviously, to come back. But I mean, these are some of the questions that I mean, they're deep and they're thoughtful, and you know, I just I almost feel like Adam will like, don't you dare touch that book. But I feel like I got to get my own copy, just mark it up because there's so many lines and things that I want to like tag and do because um, I mean, it is a real treasure. It is a real treasure of
Thank you.
things that it almost reminds me of like something where I don't know if you guys have ever had to do this. I know I've had to do it at work where they'll play a YouTube video of like something like and it's 5 minutes and you listen once and then it's like listen again and then listen again. You hear something different each time and
Mhm.
it sinks in different. And I
Yeah.
feel that very much about your book is I'm gonna need to read it a few times because it was amazing the first time, but I know I'm gonna pull different aspects out each time. It's way too rich and layered and complex for me to read it once and, say, "I love it, great," but there's too much, that and that's why I think those discussion questions are so important for me.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, yeah, I wrote those discussion questions. And one question in there that I thought was important is, how does the house represent more than just a building? And what I've been saying to people as we're closing out soon is that, what is the house in your life you got to burn down?
Mm.
What are the chains in your life you have to break? What do you have to escape? I'm asking people to look inward. How does this book imprint itself on you? And say, what do you have to burn down in your own life? Maybe you have to burn down fear. Maybe you have to burn down grief. Maybe you have to burn down misinformation. And y'all are doing this with your podcast. You're burning it down in your own way. But I'm really asking people, what is the house in your life you've got to burn down?
You
And I
guys
think
like
if
making me cry on camera. That's never happened before. But it is so deeply moving because it's not I mean, the question you're asking, it is on the individual level. It's
yeah,
on the household, the community level, and all the different areas that you could apply this to. It is what you said. It's rebellion, it's resistance, it's revolution. It's those R's that you talked about that you're applying to each aspect of your life that you are asking in. And it's very moving. It's
Yeah.
like very much like I don't want to say a sermon, but I want to say a therapy of like a taking me to therapy of like, what do you need to do,
Mhm.
Rebecca? What do you need to do?
yeah,
And what can and that is the goal. I mean, I do think that with this podcast is I think like that is our one way where we talk about the ugly things and we talk about the stuff that it does scare me to talk about stuff. And I do feel like when they're like looking at everything and like Adam and I made the decision like we're okay with it. If we
hmm,
get targeted, if we get in trouble for it, like we're not we wanna feel like we did something through the use of literature to change and document how we feel and to get minds expanded and to support, a really well-rounded horror community and all authors too, that we're inclusive and just really thoughtful about that. And I appreciate you saying that we're doing it in our own way here, but,
yeah,
there's always that feeling that we wanna do more,
yeah,
and
sure.
having someone like you on where we're saying, 'cause that's I told you that before we started recording, and I say that all the time, but it's like, I don't understand if things are so horrific in a book, why does it get called literature versus why is it in the
Or
horror
literary
section?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and, like, because I'm thinking, are people not crossing over? Like,
yeah.
I don't think they are, so I'm like, it feels part of my pleasure and my duty to say because I'm, like, already for the year, what is it, March or almost April, I'm at 82 books read, like, I don't
Mm,
read a lot. And if I can give people things of like, you need this, you need to try this, and just how you're even talking about like the different layers of monsters, like what would you need to do? And I'm like, the more books I read through hard books, I'm like, I don't think we would have to do that much. I mean, that is a big part of
Mm,
people looking at, "No, fuck this. I'm not dealing with this anymore. I'm not
yeah.
putting up with this." And just, like, the freedom to look at that, and I love how your book is, like, for those ancestral people that didn't get what they needed, that didn't get what they deserved, for those of us who have had privilege for a really long time to say, "We have to continue this. We have to be good allies. We have to keep learning these things because they're counting on us to not."
Mm,
Mhm.
Right? And, it's just it's this full scope of the impact, and I love how you use the word imprint because that's what the book felt like it did to me.
mm,
It was an imprint, and
Yep.
that's what I'm looking for. That to me is the hallmark of a book of, like, it lives in your spirit.
Yeah.
You can't forget it if you wanted to,
Mhm.
and I feel like that's what your characters did to me.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you. I love that. That means a lot to me. That's why I
It's
wrote the book.
huge.
Yeah,
It's
that's why I
huge.
wrote
I
it.
mean, it's and, listeners, I told Clay this before we got on, but I was like, "This graphic," I don't know how much I'm always as a marketer, I always wanna talk about the cover here because I said I was walking out of my independent bookstore and I missed it on the first time in, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" I picked it right up, went back and purchased it, didn't even read what it was about. I was like, "I need this." So, how much control did you get over this? I mean, to me, that is a we are judging a book by a cover, and it's
Yes.
fantastic looking.
I would tell you a little bit of an exclusive. There was another cover that I was not happy with at all.
Well,
Good.
I
You burnt that one down? You
I
were like,
burned that one down, and I mean, all of them my publisher, I said, "This is not gonna work," and they made it look like a Western. I was like, "This is not it." So, I gave a lot of notes, a lot of notes, and I didn't want it to look too messy. I wanted to look clean. I wanted almost like a beige background, almost thinking of dirt or something like that.
mm,
I wanted a house there. I wanted flame, just a couple of colors. So, they listened to me. They're like, "Okay, we get what you're saying." So, but the original cover, I did not like at all. So I fought to have a different cover. We went through a few mock-up covers, and we eventually landed on this, and I'm really happy with it. I wanted to stand out, and I wanted to I feel like you have an idea of what's going on. Like, "Oh, okay.
mhm.
Okay.
immediately.
Yeah, you know." So, but the other
Yeah.
one looked like some John Wayne stuff. I don't know what it was.
Yeah,
So,
we don't need that.
we don't need that.
Uh,
So,
the
yeah, I did
John
have
Wayne's very problematic too.
there we go, John Wayne, yeah. But I did have some impact input on it, and once they got my vision, they were like, "Okay, cool, we understand what you're saying." So, I wasn't being a diva, I just didn't like the other cover. So, I'm really
You know,
proud of it, I love it.
you can't have the guts of the book be that amazing and then not have the cover match. Like, no
Right,
Yeah.
way, not
right.
happening.
Mhm.
Exactly, exactly. So, I fought for it in a good way. It wasn't a hard fight, but, what happens is they give you a mock-up, they give you a cover, and they say, "Go from there," but it just was so far removed from what I wanted. So
Yeah.
I love where it's at now. It's clean, it's sharp, but it's pointed and it's powerful. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Which
Absolutely.
is exactly what's inside too. So, wanna say we're coming up on the hour here, so I just wanna say you've talked about this book a lot in a lot of different places. To close it out, I just wanna ask you, what's something that either doesn't come up often or hasn't come up at all that you wish you've talked about more when it comes to this book, or wish someone had asked you that maybe hasn't been touched on and as much as you would want, that you would want readers to know about this book as we're closing out and getting people hopefully they're pre-order or they're ordering this book as we're finishing this and they're listening to it.
That's a good question. What is something that I wanted to talk about with the book, but I haven't? I will say, and this happens a lot in horror, there is a war of faith in this book. There is a war of Christianity and African faith in this book. There's a character named Emma Jane who is totally fictional, so I didn't make her a larger character that believes in what we call hoodoo. There is a war of religion, a war of spirit in the book. At the end, there is a minister who's buried alive.
Yes.
So, there's a lot of layers in here, but what I didn't wanna do a stereotypical book about slavery, and all of the enslaved people are just these happy Christians. I wanted to show even back then, there were wars around faith,
Mm,
and they were holding on to their African retentions. So I would encourage people when you read the book, there's a lot of nuggets around religion and faith. And one of the ministers, he is in the profit of selling of selling black people, right?
he
And
needs to get his, and he did, and I was
he
happy
sure
about it.
did, he sure did. So the faith angle is really interesting, and in horror, and like I said, I never saw it as a horror book, but I'm seeing it now, much of horror deals with morality, and again, the good and the
Yep,
evil, God and the devil, and all these types of things. So that is definitely a layered angle in Burn Down Master's House. So I'm also asking people to burn down the idea of what your faith looks like. Is your faith really serving you? Is it really serving your community? Because there were
right.
people in the South who believed that they were gifted by God to be enslavers, right?
Disgusting,
So
disgusting.
that angle is and when we're talking now about Christian nationalism, that's definitely a big angle in the book, especially in the last chapter.
Well, let me bring up another book while I said John Wayne's problematic. If you've never read Jesus and John Wayne as a nonfiction, it
I have not.
absolutely shows how the Christian nationalism, the trad wife, the
Mm,
everything has been worked in, and how really how you talked about how we can stoke fear and essentially gain control and compliance. It was equated to masculinity and timidity and working through a lot of those things that, like, even like within like the Mormon faith of like keep sweet and whatnot, things like that. But I've read like was it Tracy Cross root work, and it
mhm.
talks a lot about
Yeah,
the hoodoo in there.
yeah,
And I didn't look up more on this, but I saw a video the other day of someone saying, "Do you know what voodoo actually is?" And they were saying, like, in order for them to treat you, they had to make a doll that looked like you, and
yeah,
then they would put the pin to say, "Oh, you were here last time because you had a headache,"
yeah,
and they put the pin there. And all of these natural religions and the ways that they were done, because they didn't know how to read, they didn't know how to
Weren't
write,
allowed. Yeah.
and so now you're just gonna go ahead and villainize.
yep.
You're gonna basically make it that someone's cursing you. I mean, this is what I'm talking about, Clay, where everything I thought I knew just seems to be a freaking whitewashed lie.
Yes.
So, and I'm grateful. I know there's a lot of shit that happens on the internet, but I'm grateful for these things of like voices, and that you can train an algorithm to like come in and show you some of these things. But even just like the hoodoo and the ancestral, and it's funny because sometimes Adam and I get into these deep conversations, and then it happened. We had the conversation. I want to say we did it with Aaron Crosby Epstein, but I know it's been on some podcasts that I've been listening to now. But just that I said, like, I'm always sad because I said I don't have any roots. I don't have anything. Like, I don't have any cool language. I don't have any type of conventional cooking. I was like, I'm not proud of anybody from a lineage. I don't have anything like that. And it's basically what's come out recently and like on Instagram and other people putting out. It's like, yeah, because we killed everybody else's stuff. Like as a white person, you've snuffed everybody else's stuff out. You villainized it. You don't know anything. You don't have a motherland for it. And you don't have ways to, and Adam was like saying to me, like, well, yeah, the reason why you don't cook like traditionally white people, because they weren't the ones doing the cooking. They
Right.
didn't learn anything. They just took everybody else's labor. And it's just these are the kind of things where I'm like, I love that I'm having the reflections, and I love that Adam and I can talk about it, and then he's well read enough through, like, having a master's degree and has these interests and is, like, willing to talk to me about it, but I know that that means I still have so much more to do, and I'm glad that, like, I can recognize that, okay, I'm sad for something that I didn't get a choice in, but I feel even more sad for the people that did have those things and they were taken away from them and diluted, and that's horrible, and it's just like, I
That's
guess
the house you have to burn down,
it
That's
right?
the
is.
Like,
house you
that's
gotta
the
burn
yeah.
down. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
So,
well
yeah.
said. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for your time, and where can they hear you on your SiriusXM show? Where can they find you?
Follow me on all social media at Clay Cane, ClayCane. My Sirius XM radio show is channel 126 Urban View from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We also put clips on my podcast, Clay Cane Extended, and pick up the book wherever books are sold. Spread the fire, spread it, spread that fire, burn down Master's house. And I really want to thank y'all for inviting me on. What a great conversation. I really thank you, Adam and Rebecca. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
Thank you,
absolutely.
Clay.
Thank you, Clay. Have
Thank
a
you.
great
Have a
night.
good
All
night.
right, you too. Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.
See you.